Part 3, Chapter 5 of A Raw Youth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Raw Youth by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. Part 3, Chapter 5. As soon as I was announced, Anna Andreevna threw down her sewing and rushed to meet me in the outermost of her rooms, a thing which had never happened before. She held out both hands to me and flushed quickly. She led me into her room in silence, sat down to her needlework again, made me sit down beside her. She did not go on with her sewing, but still scrutinized me with the same fervent sympathy, without uttering a word. "You sent Darya Onisimovna to me," I began bluntly, rather overwhelmed by this exaggerated display of sympathy, though I found it agreeable. She suddenly began talking without answering my question. "I have heard all about it. I know all about it. That terrible night. Oh, what you must have gone through! Can it be true? Can it be true that you were found unconscious in the frost?" "You heard that from Lambert," I muttered, reddening. "I heard it all from him at the time, but I've been eager to see you. Oh, he came to me in alarm. At your lodging, where you have been lying ill, they would not let him in to see you, and they met him strangely. I really don't know how it was, but he kept telling me about that night. He told me that when you had scarcely come to yourself, you spoke of me, and of your devotion to me. I was touched to tears, Arkady Makarovitch, and I don't know how I have deserved such warm sympathy on your part, especially considering the condition in which you were yourself. Tell me, Monsieur Lambert was the friend of your childhood, was he not?" "Yes, but what happened? I confess I was indiscreet, and perhaps I told him then a great deal I shouldn't have." "Oh, I should have heard of that wicked, horrible intrigue apart from him. I always had a presentiment that they would drive you to that, always. Tell me, is it true that Buring dared to lift his hand against you?" She spoke as though it were entirely owing to Buring and her that I had been found under the wall. And she is right, too, I thought, but I flared up. If he had lifted his hand against me, he would not have gone away unpunished, and I should not be sitting before you now without having avenged myself, I answered hotly. It struck me that she wanted for some reason to irritate me, to set me against somebody. I knew, of course, against whom, yet I fell in with it. "You say that you had a presentiment that I should be driven to this, but on Katerina Nikolaevna's side it was, of course, only a misunderstanding, though it is true that she was too hasty in allowing her kindly feeling for me to be influenced by that misunderstanding." "I should think she was too hasty indeed," Anna Andreevna assented quickly, with a sort of ecstasy of sympathy. "Oh, if only you knew the intrigue that is being hatched there now! Of course, Arkady Makarovitch, of course it is difficult for you to realize now all the delicacy of my position," she brought out, blushing and casting down her eyes. "Since I saw you last, that very morning I took a step which not everyone would be able to understand and interpret rightly. So it is hardly likely that it would be understood by anyone with your still uncorrupted mind, and your fresh, loving, unsophisticated heart. Believe me, my dear friend, I appreciate your devotion to me, and I shall repay it with my everlasting gratitude. In the world, of course, they will throw stones at me. They have thrown them already. But even if they were right from their odious point of view, which of them could, which of them dare judge me? I have been abandoned by my father from childhood up. We Versilovs are an ancient, noble Russian family, yet we are adventurers, and I am eating the bread of charity. Was it not natural I should turn to one who has taken the place of a father to me, at whose hands I have received nothing but kindness during all these years? My feelings for him are known only to God, and he alone can judge them, and I refuse to accept the judgment of the world upon the step I have taken. When there is, moreover, at the bottom of this, the most cunning, the most evil intrigue, and the plot to ruin a trusting, noble-hearted father is the work of his own daughter, is it to be endured? No, I will save him if I have to ruin my reputation. I am ready to be with him simply as a nurse, to take care of him and to look after him, but I will not let hateful, cold, mercenary worldliness triumph." She spoke with unwonted fire, very possibly half assumed, though at the same time sincere, because it was evident how deeply involved she was in the matter. Oh, I felt that she was lying, though sincerely, for one can lie sincerely, and that she was now evil. But it is wonderful how it often is in dealing with women, this assumption of perfect refinement, these lofty manners, these inaccessible heights of well-bred grandeur and proud chastity. All this quite threw me out of my reckoning, and I began agreeing with her on every point, so long as I was with her. That is, I could not bring myself to contradict her anyway. Oh, a man is in absolute moral slavery to a woman, especially if he is a generous man. Such a woman can convince a generous man of anything she likes. She and Lambert, my goodness, I thought, looking at her in perplexity. To tell the whole truth, however, I don't know what to think of her to this day. Truly, her feelings were known only to God, and besides, human beings are such complicated machines that one cannot analyze them in some cases, and above all if the human being in question is a woman. "Anna Andreyevna, what is it you exactly want me to do?" I asked, with a good deal of decision, however. "How? What do you mean by your question, Arkady Makarovitch?" "I fancy, from everything and from certain other considerations," I explained, stammering, "that you sent to me because you expected something from me. So what is it exactly?" Without answering my question, she immediately began talking again, as rapidly and as earnestly as before. "But I cannot, I am too proud to enter into explanations and negotiations with unknown persons, like Monsieur Lambert. I have been waiting for you. I don't want Monsieur Lambert. My position is awful, desperate, Arkady Makarovitch. I am forced to duplicity, hemmed in by the machinations of that woman, and that is more than I can endure. I am driven almost to the humiliation of intriguing, and I have been waiting for you as my savior. You must not blame me for looking greedily about me to find one friend at least, and so I cannot help being glad to see a friend. He who could think of me and even utter my name half frozen on that night must be devoted to me. That's what I've been thinking all this time, and that is why I rely on you." She looked into my face with impatient inquiry, and again I had not the heart to disillusion her, and to tell her plainly that Lambert had deceived her, and that I had by no means told him that I was so devoted to her, and that her name was not the only one I mentioned. And so by my silence I confirmed, as it were, Lambert's lie. Oh, she knew very well, I am convinced, that Lambert had been exaggerating and simply lying to her, solely in order to have a plausible excuse to call upon her, and to get into touch with her, though she looked into my face as though she were convinced of my truth and devotion. She must have known that I did not bring myself to contradict her from delicacy of feeling and the awkwardness of youth. But whether I was right in this surmise, I don't know. Perhaps I am horribly evil-minded. "My brother is taking my part," she said, with sudden heat, seeing that I was not disposed to speak. "I'm told you have been at my lodgings," I muttered in confusion. "Yes, You know, poor Prince Nikolay Ivanitch has no place now where he can take refuge from this intrigue, or rather from his own daughter, unless in your lodgings, that is, the lodgings of a friend. You know he looks upon you at least as a friend, and if you will only do something for his benefit, then do this. If only you can, if only you have the generosity and courage, and finally, if it is really true that there is something you can do. Oh, it is not for my sake. It's not for my sake, but for the sake of the poor old man, the only person who genuinely loved you, and who has become as attached to you as though you were his own son, and is still missing you. For myself, I expect nothing, even from you, since even my own father has played me such a treacherous, such a spiteful trick. "I believe Andrei Petrovitch," I began. "Andrei Petrovitch," she repeated with bitter mockery. "Andrei Petrovitch, in answer to a direct question from me, told me on his word of honor that he had never had any intentions in regard to Katerina Nikolaevna, and I completely believed it when I took that step. And yet it seemed that his composure only lasted till he heard of Baron Boring." "That's wrong!" I cried. "There was a moment when I too believed in his love for that woman, but it's a mistake. And even if it were so, he might, I should think, be perfectly composed about it now, since the retirement of that gentleman." "What gentleman?" "Boring." "Who has told you of his retirement? Perhaps the gentleman in question never had any such views." She jeered malignantly. I fancied, too, that she looked at me jeeringly. "Daria Onisimovna told me," I muttered in confusion, which I was not able to conceal, and which she saw only too clearly. "Daria Onisimovna is a very nice person, and of course I cannot forbid her loving me, but she has no means of knowing what does not concern her." My heart began to ache, and as she had been reckoning on rousing my indignation, I did in fact begin to feel indignant, but not with "that woman," but for the time being with Anna Andreevna herself. I got up. "As an honorable man, I ought to warn you, Anna Andreevna, that your expectations in regard to me may turn out to be utterly unfounded." "I expect you to be my champion," she said, looking at me resolutely. "Abandoned as I am by every one, your sister, if you care to have it so, Arkady Makarovitch." Another instant, and she would have burst into tears. "Well, you had better not expect anything, for perhaps nothing will come of it," I muttered with an indescribable feeling of disgust. "How am I to understand your words?" she said, showing her consternation too plainly. "Why, that I am going away from you all, and that's the end of it!" I suddenly exclaimed almost furiously. "And the letter I shall tear up. Goodbye." I bowed to her and went out without speaking, though at the same time I scarcely dared to look at her, but had hardly gone downstairs when Daria Onisimovna ran after me with a half sheet of paper folded in two. Where Daria Onisimovna had sprung from, and where she had been sitting while I was talking with Anna Andreevna, I cannot conceive. She did not utter a word, but merely gave me the paper and ran away. I unfolded it. On the paper, clearly and distinctly written, was Lambert's address, and it had apparently been got ready several days before. I suddenly recalled that when Daria Onisimovna had been with me that day, I had told her that I did not know where Lambert lived, meaning I don't know and don't want to know. But by this time I had learned Lambert's address from Liza, whom I had specially asked to get it for me from the address bureau. Anna Andreevna's action seemed to me too definite, even cynical. Although I had declined to assist her, she was simply sending me straight to Lambert, as though she had not the slightest faith in my refusal. It was quite clear to me that she knew everything about the letter, and from whom she could have learnt it, if not from Lambert, to whom she was sending me that I might cooperate with him. There was no doubt that they all, every one of them, looked upon me as a feeble boy without character or will, with whom they could do anything, I thought with indignation. Nevertheless, I did go to Lambert's. Where else could I have satisfied my curiosity? Lambert, as it appeared, lived a long way off, in Cross Alley, close to the Summer Gardens, still in the same lodgings. But when I ran away from him that night, I had so completely failed to notice the way and the distance, that when I got his address from Liza 4 days earlier, I was surprised and could scarcely believe that he lived there. As I was going upstairs, I noticed at the door of the flat on the 3rd story 2 young men, and thought they had rung the bell before I came and were waiting for the door to be opened. While I was mounting the stairs, they both, turning their backs on the door, scrutinized me very attentively. The flat is all let out in rooms, and they must be going to see another lodger, I thought, frowning as I went up to them. It would have been very disagreeable to me to find anyone else at Lambert's. Trying not to look at them, I put out my hand to the bell. "Attendez," one of them cried to me. "Please, please don't ring again yet," said the other young man in a soft, musical voice, slightly drawling the words. "Here, we'll finish this, and then we'll all ring all together, shall we?" I waited. They were both very young men, about 20 or 22. They were doing something rather strange at the door, and I began to watch them with surprise. The one who had cried "Attendez" was a very tall fellow, over 6 feet, thin and lean, but very muscular, with a very small head in proportion to his height, and with a strange, as it were comic expression of gloom on his rather pock-marked, though agreeable and by no means stupid, face. There was a look, as it were, of exaggerated intentness, and of unnecessary and excessive determination in his eyes. He was very badly dressed, in an old wadded overcoat, with a little fur collar of mangy-looking raccoon. It was too short for him and obviously second-hand. He had on shabby high boots, almost like a peasant's, and on his head was a horribly crushed, dirty-looking top-hat. His whole appearance was marked by slovenliness. His ungloved hands were dirty, and his long nails were black. His companion, on the other hand, was smartly dressed, judging from his light skunk fur coat, his elegant hat, and the light new gloves on his slender fingers. He was about my height, and he had an extremely charming expression on his fresh and youthful face. The tall fellow was taking off his tie, an utterly threadbare, greasy ribbon, hardly better than a piece of tape, and the pretty-looking youth, taking out of his pocket another newly purchased black tie, was putting it round the neck of the tall fellow, who, with a perfectly serious face, submissively stretched out his very long neck, throwing his overcoat back from his shoulders. "No, it won't do if the shirt is so dirty," said the younger one. "The effect won't be good. It will only make it look dirtier. I told you to put on a collar. I don't know how— Do you know how to do it?" he said, turning suddenly to me. "What?" I asked. "Why, fasten his tie. You see, it ought to go like this, to hide his dirty shirt, or else the whole effect is spoilt, whatever we do. I have just bought the tie for a rouble at Philippe's, the hairdresser's, on purpose for him." "Was it that rouble?" muttered the tall one. "Yes, I haven't a farthing now." "Then you can't do it? In that case we must ask Alphonsine." "To see Lambert?" the tall fellow asked me abruptly. "Yes," I answered with no less determination, looking him in the face. "Dolgorouki?" he went on with the same air and the same voice. "No, not Korovkin," I answered as abruptly mistaking what he said. "Dolgorauki?" The tall fellow almost shouted again, and he took a step towards me almost menacingly. His companion burst out laughing. "He says Dolgorauki and not Korovkin," he explained to me. "You know, in the Journal des Débats the French constantly distort Russian names." "In the Indépendance," growled the tall fellow. "Well, it's just the same in the Indépendance. Dolgoruki, for instance. They write Dolgorauki. I have seen it myself. And Valoniev is always written Comte Wallonif." "Doboini!" cried the tall fellow. "Yes, there's Doboini too. I've seen it myself." And we both laughed. Some Russian Madame Doboini abroad. But there's no need to mention them all, you know, he said, turning suddenly to the tall fellow. "Excuse me, are you Monsieur Dolgoruki?" "Yes, my name is Dolgoruki. How do you know it?" The tall one suddenly whispered something to the pretty-looking lad. The latter frowned and shook his head, but the tall fellow immediately addressed me. "Monsieur le Prince, vous n'avez pas de roubles d'argent pour nous, pas deux, mais un seul, voulez-vous?" "Oh, how horrid you are!" cried the boy. "Nous vous rendons," concluded the tall one, mispronouncing the French words coarsely and clumsily. "He's a cynic, you know," the boy laughed to me. "And do you suppose he can't speak French? He speaks like a Parisian, but he is mimicking those Russians who are awfully fond of talking aloud in French together before other people, though they can't speak it themselves." "Dans les wagons," the tall fellow explained. "To be sure, in railway carriages. Oh, what a bore you are! There's no need to explain. Why will you always pretend to be a fool?" Meanwhile, I took out a rouble and offered it to the tall fellow. "Nous vous rendons," said the latter, pocketing the rouble, and turning to the door with a perfectly unmoved and serious face, he proceeded to kick it with his huge coarse boot, and without the faintest sign of ill humor. "Ah, you will be fighting with Lambert again," the boy observed uneasily. "You had much better ring the bell." I rang the bell, but the tall fellow continued kicking the door nevertheless. "Ah, sacré!" we heard Lambert's voice the other side of the door, and he quickly opened it. "Dis donc, voulez-vous que je vous casse la tête, mon ami?" he shouted to the tall man. "Mon ami, voilà Dolgorouki, l'autre mon ami," the tall fellow replied with dignified gravity, staring at Lambert, who was red with anger. As soon as the latter saw me, he seemed suddenly transformed. "It's you, Arcady! At last! Then you are better! Better are you at last!" He seized my hands, pressing them warmly. He was, in fact, so genuinely delighted that I felt pleased at once, and even began to like him. "I've come to you first of all." "Alphonsine!" cried Lambert. She instantly skipped out from behind the screen. "Le voilà!" "C'est lui!" cried Alphonsine, clasping and unclasping her hands. She would have rushed to embrace me, but Lambert protected me. "There, there, there! Down, down!" he shouted to her as though she were a dog. "It's like this, Arcady. Some fellows have agreed to dine together today at the Tatars. I shan't let you go. You must come with us. We'll have dinner. I'll get rid of these fellows at once, and then we can have a chat. Come in, come in! We'll set off at once, only wait a minute." I went in and stood in the middle of that room, looking about me and remembering it. Lambert, behind the screen, hurriedly dressed. The tall fellow and his companion followed us in spite of Lambert's words. We all remained standing. "Mademoiselle Alphonsine, voulez-vous me baiser?" growled the tall man. "Mademoiselle Alphonsine," the younger one was beginning, showing her the tie, but she flew savagely at both of them. "Ah, le petit vilain!" she shouted to the younger one. "Ne m'approchez pas! Ne me salissez pas!" Et vous, le grand dadais, je vous planque à la porte tous les deux, savez-vous cela? Though she warned him off with contempt and disgust, as though she were really afraid of being soiled by contact with him, which I could not at all understand, because he was such a pretty fellow, and turned out to be just as well dressed when he took off his overcoat, the younger of the two men kept asking her to tie his tall friend's cravat for him, and to put him on one of Lambert's clean collars first. She was on the point of beating them in her indignation at such a suggestion, but Lambert, overhearing, shouted to her behind the screen not to hinder them, but to do as they asked. "They won't leave off if you don't," he added, and Alphonsine instantly produced a collar, and began to fasten the tall man's cravat without the slightest sign of disinclination. The man stretched out his neck just as he had done on the stairs, while she tied his cravat. "Mademoiselle Alphonsine, avez-vous vendu votre Bologne?" he asked. "Qu'est-ce que ça, ma Bologne?" The younger man explained that ma Bologne meant a lapdog. "Tiens, quel est ce baragouin?" "Je parle comme une dame russe sur les eaux minérales," observed le grand dadais, still with his neck outstretched. "Qu'est-ce que ça qu'une dame russe sur les eaux minérales? Eh, où est donc votre jolie montre que Lambert vous a donnée?" she said suddenly to the younger one. "What? No watch again?" Lambert chimed in irritably behind the screen. "We've eaten it up," growled le grand dadais. "I sold it for 8 roubles. It was only silver gilt, and you said it was gold. So now at the shop it's only 16 roubles," the younger answered Lambert, defending himself reluctantly. "We must put an end to this," Lambert said even more irritably. "I don't buy you clothes, my young friend, and give you good things for you to spend them on your tall friend. What was that tie, too, that you bought him?" "That was only a rouble. That was not with your money. He had no cravat at all, and he ought to buy a hat, too." "Nonsense!" Lambert was really angry. "I gave him enough for a hat, too, and he goes off and wastes it on oysters and champagne. He positively reeks. He's dirty and untidy. You can't take him anywhere. How can I take him out to dinner?" "I'm a cad," growled the dadais. "Nous avons un rouble d'argent que nous avons prêté chez notre nouvel ami." "Don't you give him anything, Arcady," Lambert cried again. "Excuse me, Lambert, I ask you plainly for 10 roubles," cried the boy, growing suddenly angry and flushing, which made him look twice as handsome as before. "And don't ever dare to say such stupid things as you did just now to Dolgoruki. I must have 10 roubles to pay Dolgoruki back that rouble at once, and with the rest I'll buy Andreyev a hat, so you see." Lambert came out from behind the screen. "Here are 3 yellow notes and 3 roubles, and there's nothing more till Tuesday, and don't dare, or else—" Le grand dadais fairly snatched the money from him. "Dolgorouki, here is the rouble. Nous vous rendons avec beaucoup de grâce. Petya, come along," he called to his companion. Then, holding up the 2 notes and waving them in the air, while he stared fixedly at Lambert, he yelled at the top of his voice, "Où est Lambert? Où est Lambert? Êtes-vous Lambert?" "How dare you? How dare you?" Lambert yelled too, in terrible wrath. I saw that underlying all this was something in the past of which I knew nothing, and I looked on in astonishment. But the tall fellow was not in the least alarmed by Lambert's wrath. On the contrary, he yelled louder than ever, "Ohé, Lambert!" and so on. And so shouting, they went out on the stairs. Lambert was running after them, but he turned back. "I'll throw them out by the scruff of their necks. They cost more than they are worth. Come along, Arcady, I'm late. I'm expected there by another fellow I need. A beast, too. They're all beasts. A low lot, a low lot, he shouted again, almost gnashing his teeth, but all at once he recovered himself completely. I am glad that you have come at last. Alphonsine, not a step out of the house. Let us go. At the steps a smart turnout was waiting for him. We got in, but all the way he could not quite regain his composure and get over a sort of rage against the two young men. I was surprised at his taking it so seriously, and what's more, at their being so disrespectful to Lambert, and his seeming almost frightened of them. From the old impression that had been stamped on me from childhood, it still seemed to me that everyone must be afraid of Lambert, as, in spite of all my independence, I certainly stood in awe of him myself at that moment. "I tell you now they are all a low lot," Lambert persisted. "Would you believe it, that tall ruffian pestered me the day before yesterday in decent company? He stood in front of me and shouted, 'Ohé, Lambert!' in decent company. Everyone laughed, and do you know it was for me to give him money? Would you believe it? I gave it him. Oh, that ruffian! Would you believe it? He was an ensign in a regiment, but he was kicked out, and you wouldn't imagine it, but he is a man of education. He was brought up in a good family. You would hardly believe it. He has ideas. He might. And damn it all! And he is a perfect Hercules. He is of use, though not of much use. And you can see he does not wash his hands. I interested a lady in his case, an old lady of very good position, telling her that he was penitent, and on the point of committing suicide from remorse, and he went to see her, sat down and began whistling. And the other, the pretty fellow, is a general's son. His family is ashamed of him. I got him off when he was arrested. I saved him, and you see how he repays me. There are no people worth their salt here. I'll pay them out, I'll pay them out." "They know my name. Did you talk to them about me?" "Yes, it was stupid of me. Please stay on a little after dinner. Control your feelings. There's an awful canaille coming. Yes, he's an awful canaille, and awfully cunning. They are all rascals here. There's not an honest man about. Well, we'll finish, then. What's your favorite dish? But it doesn't matter. The fare is always good. I'll pay, don't you worry. It's a good thing you are well dressed. I can give you money. You must come often. Only fancy, I've stood them meat and drink here. It's fish pie every day of the week. That watch he sold, it's the second time. That little fellow, Trichatoff, you saw him. Alphonsine is sick at the very sight of him, and won't let him come near her. And here, in the presence of officers, he calls out, 'I must have woodcock.' I stood him woodcock, but I'll pay them out. Do you remember, Lambert, how we went to a restaurant together in Moscow, and you stuck a fork into me, and how you had 50 rubles then? Yes, I remember. Damn it, I remember. I like you, you may believe it. Nobody likes you, but I like you. I'm the only one that does. You remember that. The pockmarked fellow that is coming here is a cunning canaille. Don't you answer any of his questions. If he begins talking, it's all right. But if he begins questioning, make some nonsensical answer or hold your tongue." At any rate, in his excitement, he did not question me much on the way. I even felt insulted at his having such confidence in me, and not even suspecting that I mistrusted him. I fancied that I detected in him the absurd idea that he could still order me about. And what's more, he's awfully ignorant and ill-bred, I thought, as I went into the restaurant. I had been into that restaurant in the Morskaya before, during my disgraceful period of degradation and depravity, and so the impression of those rooms, of those lackeys looking at me and recognizing me as a familiar visitor, and finally the impression made on me by the mysterious company of Lambert's friends, amongst whom I found myself so suddenly, and to whom I seemed already to belong, and, above all, an obscure feeling that of my own free will I was going into something abominable, and that I should certainly end up by doing something horrid, all this seemed to go through me in a flash. There was a moment when I very nearly went away, but the moment passed, and I remained. The pock-marked man, of whom for some reason Lambert was so much afraid, was already waiting for us. He was one of those men of stupidly practical appearance, whom I have always from my childhood detested. He was about 45, of middle height, with hair just turning gray. He was disgustingly close-shaven, except for two little neatly trimmed gray whiskers, like sausages, one on each side of his extremely flat and spiteful-looking face. He was, of course, dull, solemn, and taciturn, and even conceited, as such nonentities always are. He looked at me very attentively, but he did not say a word. Lambert was so stupid that though he sat us down at the same table together, he did not think it necessary to introduce us, and so he may well have taken me for one of the blackmailers associated with Lambert. To the two young men, who arrived almost simultaneously with us, he did not address a single word during the whole of dinner, but it was evident that he knew them well. He talked only to Lambert, and then almost in a whisper, and indeed Lambert did most of the talking, and the pock-marked man confined himself to fragmentary and wrathful ejaculations, which sounded like an ultimatum. He behaved superciliously, was ill-humored and sarcastic, while Lambert, on the other hand, was extremely excited, and was evidently trying to persuade him all the time, probably urging him on to some undertaking. On one occasion I put out my hand to take a bottle of red wine. The pock-marked man immediately took a bottle of sherry and handed it to me, though he had not said a word to me till then. "Try this," he said, offering me the bottle. I guessed on the spot that he, too, knew everything in the world about me, my story, and my name, and perhaps the fact that Lambert was counting upon me. The idea that he was taking me for a satellite maddened me again, and Lambert's face betrayed an intense and very stupid uneasiness when the pock-marked man addressed me. The latter noticed it and laughed. There's no doubt that Lambert depends on all of them, I thought, hating him at that instant with my whole soul. In this way, though we were sitting at the same table throughout the whole dinner, we were divided into two groups: the pock-marked man with Lambert facing each other close to the window, while I was beside the grubby Andreyev, and Trishatov sat facing me. Lambert hurried on the dinner, continually urging the waiters to make haste with the dishes. When the champagne was brought, he held out his glass to me. "To your health! Let's clink glasses," he said, breaking off his conversation with the pock-marked man. "And will you let me clink with you too?" said the pretty youth, holding out his glass across the table. Till the champagne arrived, he had been very silent and seemed pensive. The Dade said nothing at all, but sat silent and ate a great deal. "With pleasure," I answered Trishatov. We clinked glasses and drank. "But I'm not going to drink your health," observed the Dade, turning to me. "Not because I desire your death, but so that you may not drink any more here today." He spoke gloomily and ponderously. "3 glasses is enough for you. I see you are looking at my unwashed fist," he went on, putting his fist on the table. "I don't wash it, but as it is I put it at Lambert's service for smashing other people's heads when he's in a tight place." And saying this, he brought down his fist on the table with such force that he set all the plates and glasses rattling. Besides us, there were people dining at 4 other tables, all of them officers or gentlemen of dignified appearance. It was a fashionable restaurant. All broke off their conversation for a moment and looked round to our corner, and indeed I fancied we had attracted curiosity for some time past. Lambert flushed crimson. "Ah, he's at it again! I thought I had asked you to behave yourself, Nikolay Semyonovitch," he said to Andreyev in a furious whisper. The latter gave him a prolonged stare. "I don't want my new friend Dolgorouki to drink a great deal here today." Lambert flushed more hotly than ever. The pock-marked man listened in silence, but with evident pleasure. Andreyev's behavior seemed to please him for some reason. I was the only one who did not understand why I was not to drink much wine. "He says that because he's only just had some money. You shall have another 7 rubles directly after dinner. Only do let us have dinner. Don't disgrace us," Lambert hissed at him. "Aha!" the Day growled triumphantly. At this the pock-marked man was absolutely delighted, and he sniggered spitefully. "Listen, you really—" began Trichetoff to his friend with uneasiness and almost distress in his voice, evidently anxious to restrain him. Andreyev subsided, but not for long. That was not his intention. Just across the table, 5 paces from us, 2 gentlemen were dining, engaged in lively conversation. Both were middle-aged gentlemen, who looked extremely conscious of their own dignity. One was tall and very stout. The other was also very stout, but short. They were discussing in Polish the events of the day in Paris. For some time past, the Day had been watching them inquisitively and listening to their talk. The short Pole evidently struck him as a comic figure, and he promptly conceived an aversion for him, after the manner of envious and splenetic people who often take such sudden dislikes for no reason whatever. Suddenly the short Pole pronounced the name of the deputy, Madire de Mongeau, but, as so many Poles do, he pronounced it with an accent on the syllable before the last, instead of on the last syllable. This was enough for the Day. He turned to the Poles, and, drawing up himself with dignity, he suddenly articulated loudly and distinctly, as though addressing a question to them. "Madire de Mongeau?" The Poles turned to him savagely. "What do you want?" the tall, stout Pole shouted threateningly to him in Russian. The Day paused. "Madire de Mongeau?" he repeated suddenly again, to be heard by the whole room, giving no sort of explanation, just as he had stupidly set upon me at the door with the reiterated question, "Dolgorouki?" The Poles jumped up from their seats. Lambert leapt up from the table and rushed to Andreyev, but, leaving him, darted up to the Poles and began making cringing apologies to them. "They are buffoons, pani, they are buffoons," the little Pole repeated contemptuously, as red as a carrot with indignation. "Soon it will be impossible to come." There was a stir all over the room, too, and a murmur of disapproval, though laughter was predominant. "Come out, please, come along," Lambert muttered, completely disconcerted, doing his utmost to get Andreyev out of the room. The latter, looking searchingly at Lambert, and judging that he would now give the money, agreed to follow him. Probably he had already extorted money from Lambert by the same kind of disgraceful behavior. Trichetoff seemed about to run after them too, but he looked at me and checked himself. "Ah, how horrid!" he said, hiding his eyes with his slender fingers. "Very horrid," whispered the pock-marked man, looking really angry at last. Meanwhile, Lambert came back looking quite pale, and, gesticulating eagerly, began whispering something to the pock-marked man. The latter listened disdainfully, and meanwhile ordered the waiter to make haste with the coffee. He was evidently in a hurry to get off. And yet the whole affair had only been a schoolboyish prank. Trichetoff got up with his cup of coffee and came and sat down beside me. "I am very fond of him," he said to me with a face as open as though he had been talking to me like this all his life. "You can't imagine how unhappy Andreyev is. He has wasted all his sister's dowry on eating and drinking, and in fact all they had he spent on eating and drinking during the year he was in the service, and I see now he worries. And as for his not washing, it's just through despair. And he has awfully strange ideas. He'll tell you, all of a sudden, that he's both a scoundrel and an honest man, that it's all the same and no difference, and that there's no need to do anything, either good or bad, they are just the same. One may do good or bad, but that the best of all is to be still, not taking off one's clothes for a month at a time, to eat and drink and sleep and nothing else. But believe me, he only says that. And do you know, I really believe he played the fool like this just now to break off with Lambert once for all. He spoke of it yesterday. Would you believe it, sometimes at night, or when he has been sitting long alone, he begins to cry. And do you know, when he cries, it's different from anyone else. He howls. He howls in an awful way, and you know it's even more pitiful. And he's such a big, strong fellow, and then all of a sudden, to see him howling, it is sad, poor fellow, isn't it? I want to save him, though I am a wretched, hopeless scamp myself, you wouldn't believe. Will you let me in, Dolgoruki, if I ever come and see you? Oh, do come, I really like you. What for? Well, thank you. Listen, will you drink another glass? Oh, but after all, you'd better not. He was right when he said you had better not drink any more. He suddenly gave me a significant wink. But I'll drink it all the same. I have nothing now, but would you believe it? I can't hold myself back in anything. If you were to tell me I must not dine at a restaurant again, I should be ready to do anything, simply to dine there. Oh, we genuinely want to be honest, I assure you, but we keep putting it off. And the years pass by, and the best of our years. I am awfully afraid that he will hang himself. He'll go and do it without telling anyone. He's like that. They are all hanging themselves nowadays. Why, I don't know. Perhaps there are a great many people like us. I, for instance, can't exist without money to spend. Luxuries matter a great deal more to me than necessities. I say, are you fond of music? I'm awfully fond of it. I'll play you something when I come and see you. I play very well on the piano, and I studied music a very long time. I've studied seriously. If I were to compose an opera, do you know, I should take the subject from Faust. I'm very fond of that subject. I'm always making up a scene in the cathedral, just imagining it in my head, I mean. The Gothic cathedral, the interior, the choirs, the hymns. Gretchen enters, and medieval singing, you know, so that you can hear the 15th century in it. Gretchen overwhelmed with grief, to begin with a recitative, subdued but terrible, full of anguish. The choirs thunder on, gloomily, sternly, callously. Dies irae, dies illa. And all of a sudden, the voice of the devil, the song of the devil. He is unseen. There is only his song, side by side with the hymns, mingling with the hymns, almost melting into them, but at the same time quite different from them. That must be managed somehow. The song is prolonged, persistent. It must be a tenor. It must be a tenor. It begins softly, tenderly. Do you remember, Gretchen, when you were innocent, when you were a child, you came with your mother to this cathedral and lisped your prayers from an old prayer book? But the song gets louder and louder, more intense, on higher notes. There's a sound of tears in them, misery unceasing and hopeless, and finally despair. There's no forgiveness, Gretchen. There's no forgiveness for you here. Gretchen tries to pray, but only cries of misery rise up from her soul. You know when the breast is convulsed with tears. But Satan's song never ceases, and pierces deeper and deeper into the soul like a spear. It gets higher and higher, and suddenly breaks off almost in a shriek. The end to all, accursed one! Gretchen falls on her knees, clasps her hands before her, and then comes her prayer, something very short, semi-recitative, but naive, entirely without ornament, something medieval in the extreme. 4 lines, only 4 lines altogether. Stradella has some such notes. And at the last note she swoons. General confusion. She is picked up, carried out, and then the choir thunders forth. It is, as it were, a storm of voices, a hymn of inspiration, of victory, overwhelming, something in the style of our "Borne on high by angels," so that everything is shaken to its foundations, and it all passes into the triumphant cry of exultation, Hosanna, as though it were the cry of the whole universe, and it rises and rises, and then the curtain falls. Yes, you know, if only I could, I should have done something. Only I can never do anything now. I do nothing but dream. I am always dreaming. My whole life has turned into a dream. I dream at night too. Ah, Dolgoruki, have you read Dickens' Old Curiosity Shop? Yes, why? Do you remember— Wait, I will have another glass. Do you remember, there's one passage at the end when that mad old man and that charming girl of 13, his grandchild, take refuge after their fantastic flight, and wandering in some remote place in England, near a Gothic medieval church, and the little girl has received some post there, and shows the church to visitors. Then the sun is setting, and the child in the church porch, bathed in the last rays of light, stands and gazes at the sunset with gentle, pensive contemplation in her child's soul, a soul full of wonder as though before some mystery, for both alike are mysteries, the sun, the thought of God, and the church, the thought of man, aren't they? Oh, I don't know how to express it. Only God loves such first thoughts in children. While near her, on the step, the crazy old grandfather gazes at her with a fixed look. You know there's nothing special in it. In that picture of Dickens, there's absolutely nothing in it, but yet one will remember it all one's life, and it has survived for all Europe. Why? It's splendid. It's the innocence in it. And I don't know what there is in it, but it's fine. I used always to be reading novels when I was at school. Do you know I had a sister in the country only a year older than me? Oh, now it's all sold, and we have no country place. I was sitting with her on the terrace under our old lime trees. We were reading that novel, and the sun was setting too. And suddenly we left off reading, and said to one another that we would be kind too, that we would be good. I was then preparing for the university, and— Ah, Dolgoruki, you know every man has his memories. And he suddenly let his pretty little head fall on my shoulder and burst out crying. I felt very sorry for him. It is true that he had drunk a great deal of wine, but he had talked to me so sincerely, so like a brother, with such feeling. Suddenly, at that instant, we heard a shout from the street, and there was a violent tapping at the window. There was a large plate-glass window on the ground floor, so that anyone could tap on the window with his fingers from the street. This was the ejected Andreyev. "Ohé, Lambert! Où est Lambert? As-tu vu Lambert?" We heard his wild shout in the street. "Ah, yes, here he is. So he's not gone away!" cried the boy, jumping up from his place. "Our account!" Lambert cried through his clenched teeth to the waiter. His hands shook with anger as he paid the bill, but the pock-marked man did not allow Lambert to pay for him. "Why not? Why, I invited you. You accepted my invitation." "No, excuse me." The pock-marked man pulled out his purse, and reckoning out his share, he paid separately. "You'll offend me, Semyon Sidorovitch." "That's what I wish," Semyon Sidorovitch snapped out, taking his hat, and without saying good-bye to anybody, he walked alone out of the room. Lambert tossed the money to the waiter, and hurriedly ran after him, even forgetting my existence in his confusion. Trichatoff and I walked out last of all. Andreyev was standing like a post at the door, waiting for Trichatoff. "You scoundrel!" cried Lambert, unable to restrain himself. "There, there!" Andreyev grunted at him, and with one swing of his arm he knocked off his round hat, which went spinning along the pavement. Lambert flew abjectly to pick it up. 25 roubles. Andreyev showed Trichatoff the note, which he had just got from Lambert. "That's enough!" Trichatoff shouted to him. "Why must you always make an uproar? And why have you wrung 25 roubles out of him? You only ought to have had 7. "Why did I wring it out of him? He promised us a private dinner with Athenian women, and instead of women he regaled us with the pock-marked man, and what's more, I did not finish my dinner, and I've been freezing here in the cold. It's certainly worth 18 roubles. He owed me 7, so that makes 25. "Go to the devil, both of you!" yelled Lambert. "I'll send you both packing. I'll pay you out." "Lambert, I'll send you packing. I'll pay you out," cried Andreyev. "Adieu, mon prince. Don't drink any more wine. Petya, marchez. Où est Lambert? Où est Sambert? Hâtez vous, Lambert," he roared for the last time as he strode away. "So I shall come and see you, may I?" Trichatoff murmured hurriedly, and hastened after his friend. I was left alone with Lambert. "Well, come along," he brought out, seeming stupefied and breathing with difficulty. "Where shall I come along? I'm not coming anywhere with you," I made haste to reply defiantly. "You're not coming?" he said, startled and apprehensive. "Why, I have only been waiting for us to be alone." "But where to go?" I must confess I too had a slight ringing in my head from the 3 glasses of champagne and the 2 wine glasses of sherry I had drunk. This way, do you see? But this is an oyster bar. You see, it is written up. It smells so horrid." "That's only because you have just had dinner. We won't have oysters, but I'll give you some champagne." "I don't want any. You want to make me drunk." "That's what they told you. They've been laughing at you. You believe blackguards like that?" "No, Trichatoff's not a blackguard, but I know how to take care of myself, that's all." "So you've a will of your own, have you?" "Yes, I have a character. More than you have, for you're servile to everybody you meet. You disgraced us. You begged pardon of the Poles like a lackey. I suppose you've often been beaten in restaurants?" "But we must have a talk, you fool!" he cried, with the same contemptuous impatience, which almost implied, "What are you driving at?" "Why, you are afraid, aren't you? Are you my friend or not?" "I am not your friend, and you are a swindler. We'll go along simply to show you I'm not afraid of you. Oh, what a horrid smell! It smells of cheese. How disgusting!" End of Part 3, Chapter 5. Recording by Linda Johnson. Part 3, Chapter 6 of A Raw Youth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Raw Youth by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. Part 3, Chapter 6. I must beg the reader to remember again that I had a slight giddiness in my head. If it had not been for that, I should have acted and spoken differently. In the shop,
in a back room, one could indeed have eaten oysters, and we sat down to a table covered with a filthy cloth. Lambert ordered champagne. A glass of cold wine of a golden color was set before me and seemed looking at me invitingly, but I felt annoyed. "You see, Lambert, what annoys me most is that you think you can order me about now as you used to do at Touchard's, while you are cringing upon everybody here." "You fool! Ay, let's clink glasses." "You don't even deign to keep up appearances with me. You might at least disguise the fact that you want to make me drunk." "You are talking rot, and you're drunk. You must drink some more, and you'll be more cheerful. Take your glass, take it." "Why do you keep on 'take it'? I am going, and that's the end of it." And I really did get up. He was awfully vexed. "It was Trichetoff whispered that to you. I saw you whispering. You are a fool for that. Alphonsine is really disgusted if he goes near her. He's a dirty beast. I'll tell you what he's like." "You've told me already. You can talk of nothing but your Alphonsine. You're frightfully limited." "Limited?" He did not understand. "They've gone over now to that pockmarked fellow. That's what it is. That's why I sent them about their business. They're dishonest. That fellow's a blackguard, and he's corrupting them. I insisted that they should always behave decently." I sat still, and as it were, mechanically took my glass and drank a draught. "I'm ever so far ahead of you in education," I said, but he was only too delighted that I went on sitting there, and at once filled up my glass. "And you know you're afraid of them," I went on taunting him, and no doubt I was even nastier than he was at that moment. "Andreyev knocked your hat off, and you gave him 25 rubles for it." "I did give it him, but he'll pay me back. They are rebellious, but I'll be quits with them." "You are awfully upset by that pockmarked man. And do you know it strikes me that I'm the only one left you? All your hopes now are resting on me, aren't they?" "Yes, Arkasha, that is so. You are the only friend left me. You are right in saying that." He slapped me on the shoulder. What could be done with a man so crude? He was utterly obtuse, and took irony for serious praise. "You could save me from bad things if you would be a good comrade, Arcady," he went on, looking at me caressingly. "In what way could I save you?" "You know yourself what it is. Without me, like a fool, you will certainly be stupid. But I'd get you 30,000, and we would go halves, and you know how. Why, think who you are. You're nothing. No name, no position, and here you'd win first prize straight off, and having such a fortune, you'll know how to make a career." I was simply astounded at this attack. I had taken for granted that he would dissemble, but he had begun upon it with such bluntness, such schoolboyish bluntness. I resolved to listen to him from a desire to be open-minded and from intense curiosity. "Look here, Lambert, you won't understand this, but I'm consenting to listen to you because I'm open-minded," I declared firmly, and again I took a gulp at my glass. Lambert at once filled it up. "I'll tell you what, Arcady. If a fellow like Boering had dared to abuse me and strike me in the presence of a lady I adored, I don't know what I should have done. But you put up with it. I'm ashamed of you. You're a poor creature." "How dare you say that Boering struck me?" I shouted, turning crimson. "It was more I struck him than he me." "No, it was he struck you, not you struck him." "You're lying. I trod on his foot too." "But he shoved you back, and told the footman to drag you away. And she sat and looked on from her carriage and laughed at you. She knows that you have no father, and that you can be insulted." "I don't understand this schoolboyish conversation, Lambert, and I'm ashamed of it. You are saying this to irritate me, and as crudely and as openly as though I were a boy of 16. You've been plotting with Anna Andreyevna," I cried, trembling with anger, and still mechanically sipping my wine. "Anna Andreyevna is a sly jade. She's humbugging you and me and all the world. I have been waiting for you because you can best finish off with that woman." "With what woman?" "With Madame Amakoff. I know all about it. You told me yourself that she's afraid of that letter you've got." "What letter? You're talking nonsense. Have you seen her?" I muttered in confusion. "Yes, I saw her. She's beautiful, très belle, and you've taste." "I know you've seen her, but you did not dare speak to her, and I wish you did not dare to speak of her either." "You're a boy, and she laughs at you, so there. We had a virtuous lady like that in Moscow. Oh, didn't she turn up her nose! But she began to tremble when we threatened that we would tell all we knew, and she knuckled under directly, and we got all we wanted both ways, money and— you understand. Now she's virtue unapproachable again in society. Phoo! My word, isn't she high and mighty, and hasn't she got a turnout? Ah, you should have seen that little back room it happened in. You've not lived, if only you knew the little back rooms they don't shrink from." "I've thought that," I could not help muttering. "They're corrupt to their very fingertips. You don't know what they're capable of. Alphonsine lived in a house like that, and she was disgusted." "I have thought of that," I chimed in again. "But they beat you, and you complain." "Lambert, you're a blackguard. You're a damned beast," I cried, suddenly pulling myself together and beginning to tremble. "I have dreamed all this. You were in it, and Anna Andreyevna— Oh, you damned brute! Did you really think I was such a scoundrel? I dreamed it because I knew that you would say this. And besides, all this can't be so simple that you can talk to me about it so simply and directly." "He is in a rage. Tut, tut, tut," Lambert drawled, laughing and triumphant. "Well, Arkasha, my boy, now I've found out all I wanted to know. That's why I was so eager to see you. Listen. You love her, I see, and want to revenge yourself on Boring. That's what I wanted to find out. I've been suspecting it all this time while I've been waiting to see you. Ceci posé, cela change la question. And so much the better, for she loves you too. So you must marry her without a moment's delay. That's the best thing. You can't do anything else. That's your safest position. And then remember, Arcady, that you have a friend in me of whom you can make any use you like. And that friend will help you, and will marry you. I'll move heaven and earth, Arkasha. And you can give your old friend 30,000 for his trouble afterwards, eh? And I'll help you, don't doubt that. I know all the ins and outs of the business, and they shall give you the whole dowry, and you'll be a wealthy man with a career before you." Though my head was in a whirl, I looked at Lambert with wonder. He was in earnest, and not merely in earnest in what he said, but in believing in the possibility of my marrying. I could see that he thoroughly believed in it himself, and in fact caught at the idea with enthusiasm. I saw, of course, too, that he was entrapping me like a schoolboy. I certainly must have seen it even then. But the thought of marrying her so thrilled me that though I wondered how Lambert could believe in such a fantastic notion, yet at the same time I tried violently to believe in it myself, though I did not for an instant lose consciousness of the fact that it could not possibly come to pass. All this was mingled together at the same time. "But is it possible?" I faltered. "Why not? You will show her the letter. She'll be frightened and marry you to keep her money." I made up my mind not to stop Lambert in his vile suggestions, for he disclosed them to me with such simplicity, and did not suspect that I might be revolted by them, I did mutter, however, that I should not like to marry her simply by force. "I don't want to use force for anything. How can you be so base as to think me capable of it?" "Hoity-toity! Why, she'll marry you of her own accord. It won't be your doing. She'll be frightened and marry you herself. And she'll marry you because she loves you too," Lambert put in hastily. "That's a lie. You're laughing at me. How do you know she loves me?" "Of course she does. I know it. And Anna Andreyevna assumes it. It's the truth in earnest. I'm telling you that Anna Andreyevna assumes it. And I'll tell you something else when you come to me, and you'll see that she does love you. Alphonsine has been at Tsarskoe. She found out there—" "What could she find out there?" "You come back with me. She'll tell you herself, and it will please you. Why, aren't you as good as anybody? You are handsome. You are well educated." "Yes, I am well educated," I answered, hardly able to breathe. My heart was thumping, and, of course, not only from the wine. "You are handsome. You are well dressed." "Yes, I'm well dressed." "And you are good natured." "Yes, I'm good natured." "Why shouldn't she consent? Boring won't take her without money anyway, and you can deprive her of her money, so she'll be in a fright. You'll marry her and punish Boring. Why, you told me yourself that night after you were frozen that she was in love with you." "Can I have told you that?" "I'm sure I did not tell you that." "Yes, you did." "I was delirious when I said that. I suppose I told you of the letter too?" "Yes, you told me you had such a letter. I thought at the time, how can he let slip his luck if he has such a letter?" "It's all a mad idea, and I'm not so stupid as to believe it," I muttered. "To begin with, there's a difference in our ages, and besides, I've no surname." "But she'll marry you, though. She can't help marrying you when it's a question of so much money. I'll arrange that. And what's more, she loves you. You know that old prince is very well disposed to you. Through his protection, you know, you can form connections. And what does it matter if you have no name? Nowadays, nothing of that's necessary. Once you pocket the money, you'll get on, and in 10 years' time you will be such a millionaire that all Russia will resound with your fame. So you won't need a name then. Why, you can buy a title in Austria. And when you get married, keep her well in hand. They want a firm hand. If a woman's in love, she likes to feel a man's got a tight grip on her. Women like will in a man. When you frighten her with the letter, from that hour you will show her you have strength of will. Ah, she'll say he's so young and yet he has will." I sat, as it were, spellbound. I should never, with anyone else, have sunk to such an idiotic conversation, but in this case a sort of voluptuous craving drew me on to continue it. Besides, Lambert was so stupid and so low that no one could feel ashamed of anything before him. "No, do you know, Lambert," I said suddenly, "you may say what you like, but a great deal of this is absurd. I have been talking to you because we were schoolfellows, and we need not be ashamed of saying anything to one another, but I would not have demeaned myself to it with anyone else for any consideration. And, first of all, tell me why you keep repeating so positively that she's in love with me. That was quite good, what you said just now about having capital. But you see, Lambert, you don't know anything of good society. All this is still with them on the most patriarchal family system, so to say, and therefore, as so far she does not know my abilities and what a position I may achieve in the world, she'll be ashamed of me. But I won't conceal from you, Lambert, that there really is one point that might give one hope. You see, she might marry me from gratitude, because I might save her from a man she hates, and she is afraid of that man." "Ah, you mean your father? "Why, is he so much in love with her?" Lambert said, pricking up his ears with peculiar curiosity. "Oh, no!" I cried. "And how horrid you are! And at the same time, how stupid, Lambert! Why, if he were in love with her, how could I want to marry her? After all, we are father and son. That would be shameful. He loves my mother, and I saw how he held her in his arms. I did think at one time he loved Katerina Nikolaevna, but now I know for certain that though he may once have loved her, he has hated her for a long time now, and wants to revenge himself on her. And she's afraid of him, for I tell you, Lambert, he is very terrible when he begins to revenge himself. He becomes almost insane. When he's in a rage with her, he doesn't stick at anything. This is a feud in the old style, on account of the loftiest principles. In our time we don't care a hang for any general principles. Nowadays there are no general principles, but only special cases. Oh, Lambert, you don't understand. You're as stupid as a post. I am talking to you about these principles, but I'm sure you don't understand. You are awfully uneducated. Do you remember you used to beat me? Now I'm stronger than you are. Do you know that? Arkasha, come home with me. We'll spend the evening and drink another bottle, and Alphonsine will sing to the guitar." "No, I am not coming. Listen, Lambert, I've got an idea. If I don't succeed and don't marry, I shall fall back on the idea. But you haven't an idea." All right, you shall tell me about it. Come along." "I am not coming," I said, getting up. "I don't want to, and I'm not coming. I shall come and see you, but you are a blackguard. I'll give you 30,000, but I am cleaner and better than you. I see you want to deceive me all round, but I forbid you even to think of her. She's above everyone, and your plan is so low that I really wonder at you, Lambert. I want to be married, that's a different matter, but I don't want money. I despise money. I wouldn't take it if she begged me to on her knees. But marriage, that's a different matter. But you know that was quite right what you said, that one ought to keep a tight hand on her. It's a good thing to love passionately, with all the generosity of which a man is capable, and which can never be found in a woman. But to be despotic is a good thing too. For, do you know, Lambert, a woman loves despotism. You understand woman, Lambert, but you are wonderfully stupid in everything else. And, do you know, Lambert, you are not at all such a blackguard as you seem. You're simple. I like you. Ah, Lambert, why are you such a rogue? What a jolly time we might have if you weren't. You know, Trishatov's a dear." These last incoherent phrases I muttered in the street. Oh, I set all this down in every trivial detail, that the reader may see that with all my enthusiasm and my vows and promises to reform and to strive for seemliness, I was capable then of falling so easily and into such filth. And I swear that if I were not fully convinced that I am no longer the same, but have gained strength of character by practical life, I should not have confessed all this to the reader. We went out of the shop, and Lambert supported me slightly, putting his arm round me. Suddenly I looked at him, and saw in his fixed, terribly intent, and perfectly sober eyes the very same expression as I had seen that morning when I was frozen, and when he had led me to the cab with his arm round me in the same way, and listened, all eyes and ears, to my incoherent babble. Men who are drunk, but not quite hopelessly drunk, sometimes have moments of absolute soberness. "I'm not going home with you for anything," I declared firmly and coherently, looking at him sarcastically and putting aside his arm. "Come, nonsense! I'll tell Alphonsine to make tea for us. Come!" He was horribly confident that I should not get away. He put his arm round me and held me with a sort of relish, as his prey, and the prey was what he needed, of course, that evening and in that condition. It will be clear later why. "I'm not coming," I repeated. "Cab!" At that instant a sledge drove up and I jumped into it. "Where are you off to? What are you about?" yelled Lambert, clutching at my fur coat in extreme dismay. "And don't dare to follow me," I cried. "Don't drive after me." At that very instant the sledge started and my coat was torn out of Lambert's hands. "You'll come all the same," he shouted after me in an angry voice. "I shall come if I want to. I can do as I like," I retorted, turning round in the sledge. He did not follow me, of course, because there did not happen to be another sledge at hand, and I succeeded in getting out of his sight. I drove on as far as the Haymarket, and there I stopped and dismissed the sledge. I had a great desire to walk. I was not conscious of being tired or of being much intoxicated. I felt full of vigor. I was aware of a fresh flow of energy, of an exceptional readiness for any sort of enterprise, and of innumerable pleasant ideas in my brain. My heart was thudding violently and loudly. I could hear every beat. And everything seemed so charming, so easy. When I passed the sentry at the Haymarket, I felt inclined to go up and kiss him. There was a thaw. The marketplace was dingy and evil-smelling, but I was delighted even with the marketplace. I am in the Obuhovsky Prospect, I thought, and afterwards I shall turn to the left and come out in the Semyonovsky Polk. I shall take a short cut. That's delightful. It's all delightful. My coat is unbuttoned. How is it no one snatches it off? Where are the thieves? They say there are thieves in the Haymarket. Let them come. I might give them my fur coat. What do I want with a fur coat? A fur coat is property. La propriété, c'est le vol. But what nonsense, and how nice everything is. It's nice that the snow is melting. Why frost? There's no need of a frost at all. It's nice to talk nonsense, too. What was it I said to Lambert about principles? I said there were no general principles, but only special cases. That was stuff, utter stuff. And I said it on purpose, out of swagger. I am a little ashamed, but after all it doesn't matter. I'll make up for it. Don't be ashamed. Don't distress yourself, Arkady Makarovitch. Arkady Makarovitch, I like you. I like you very much. In fact, my young friend, it's a pity you're a little rascal. Yes. I suddenly stood still, and my heart began to ache with ecstasy again. Good God, what was it he said? He said that she loves me. Oh, he is a scoundrel. He told a lot of lies. That was to make me stay the night with him. But perhaps not. He said Anna Andreyevna thinks so too. Bah! But Darya Onisimovna might have found out something about it for him. She pokes her nose into everything. And why didn't I go to him? I should have found out everything. He has a plan, and I had a presentiment of it all, every bit of it. The dream. A bold scheme, Monsieur Lambert. Only let me tell you, it won't be so. Perhaps it will, though. Perhaps it will. And can he bring off my marriage? Perhaps he can. He is naive, and he believes it. He is stupid and impudent like all practical people. Stupidity and impudence combined are a great force. But confess, you were really afraid of Lambert, Arkady Makarovitch. And what does he want with honest people? He says so seriously there isn't an honest man here. Why, what are you yourself? And what am I? Don't scoundrels need honest men? In swindling, honest men are more needed than anywhere. Ha ha ha! You did not know that till now, Arkady Makarovitch. You were so innocent. Good God, what if he really were to bring about my marriage? I stood still again. Here I must confess something stupid, as it is all so long ago. I must confess that I had long before been wishing to be married, at least not wishing, and it would never have happened, and I can guarantee it never will in the future, but more than once, a great many times in fact, I had dreamed how splendid it would be to be married, especially as I was falling asleep at night. I began to dream of it when I was about 16. I had a schoolfellow of my own age at the high school, called Lavrovsky, such a quiet, sweet, pretty boy, not particularly distinguished in any other way, however. I hardly ever talked to him. One day we happened to be sitting side by side, and he was very dreamy, and suddenly he said to me, "Ah, Dolgoruki, what do you think? We ought to be married now." Yes, really, when should we be married if not now? Now would be the very best time, and yet it's impossible. And he said that so frankly. And I agreed with it at once entirely, for I already had visions of something of the sort. For several days afterwards we met and talked, as it were, in secret, only of that, however. But afterwards, I don't know how it happened, but we left off talking to each other and drifted apart. And from that time I began to dream of marriage. This, of course, would not have been worth mentioning, only I wanted to show how far back this feeling sometimes goes. "There is only one serious objection," I mused as I went on again. "Oh, of course, the trivial difference in our ages is no real obstacle, but she is such an aristocrat, and I am simply Dolgoruki. It's awfully horrid. Couldn't Versilov marry mother and petition the government for me to be legitimized as a reward for his services, so to say? He's been in the service, so must have rendered services. He was a mediator at the emancipation. Oh, damn it all, how loathsome!" I suddenly uttered this exclamation and stood still for the third time, but this time I felt as though I had been crushed to the earth. The agonizing feeling of humiliation from the consciousness that I could desire anything so shameful as the change of my surname by being legitimized, this treachery to my whole childhood, all this in one flash shattered my previous mood, and all my joyfulness was dissipated like smoke. "No, I'll never tell that to anyone," I thought, turning crimson. "I've sunk so low because I'm in love and stupid. No, if Lambert is right in anything, it is that nowadays, in our age, the man is what matters, and afterwards his money. Or rather not his money, but rather his property. With a capital like that, I would throw myself into the idea, and all Russia would ring with my fame in 10 years, and I would revenge myself on them all. And there's no need to stand on ceremony with her. Lambert's right there. She'll be frightened and simply marry me. She'll consent in the simplest and most abject way and marry me. You don't know in what little back room that happened." I remembered Lambert's words. "That's true," I went on musing. "Lambert's right in everything, 1,000 times more right than Versilov, and I and all the idealists. He is a realist. She shall see that I have strength of will, and she will say, 'He has will.' Lambert's a scoundrel, and all he wants is to get 30,000 out of me. And yet he is the only friend I have. There is no other sort of friendship, and there can be no other. That's all been invented by unpractical people. And I shan't even be degrading her. Shall I be degrading her? Not in the least. All women are like that. Are there any women who are not abject? That's why she must have a man over her. That's why she's created a subordinate creature. Woman is vice and temptation, and man is honor and generosity. So it will be to the end of time. And what if I do mean to use that document? That does not matter. That does not prevent honor or generosity. Pure unadulterated Schillers don't exist. They are invented. It does not matter if one has to pass through filth to get there, as long as the goal is magnificent. It will all be washed off. It will all be smoothed away afterwards. And now it's only breadth, it's only life, it's only vital truth. That's what it is called nowadays. Oh, I repeat again, I must be forgiven for recording all my drunken ravings at the time. Of course, this is only the essence of what I thought then, but I fancy I used those very words. I was bound to record them because I have sat down to write in order to condemn myself. And what is to be condemned if not that? Can there be anything graver in my life? Wine is no justification. In vino veritas. Entirely absorbed in such dreams, I did not notice that I had reached home, that is, mother's lodgings. I did not even notice going in, but as soon as I slipped into our tiny entrance, I realized at once that something unusual was happening. There were loud voices and outcries in the room, and I could hear that mother was crying. In the doorway I almost fell over Luceria, who was running from Makar Ivanovitch's room to the kitchen. I flung down my fur coat and went in to Makar Ivanovitch, for they were all gathered together in his room. There I found mother and Versilov. Mother was supported in his arms, and he was pressing her to his heart. Makar Ivanovitch was sitting as usual on his little bench, but he seemed overcome with weakness, and Liza had her arms round his shoulders and with an effort was holding him up, and it was evident that he was on the point of falling. I took a rapid step towards him and realized with a shudder that the old man was dead. He had only just died 1 minute before I arrived. Only 10 minutes before he had felt just as usual. No one was with him then but Liza. She had been sitting with him, telling her grief, and he had been stroking her head just as he had done the day before. Suddenly he began to tremble, Liza told us, tried to stand up, tried to cry out, and began falling on his left side, and was silent. "Rupture of the heart," said Versilov. Liza uttered a scream that could be heard all over the house, and they had all run in at once, and all that only the minute before I came in. "Arkady," Versilov cried, "run instantly to Tatiana Pavlovna. She's sure to be at home. Ask her to come at once. Take a sledge. Make haste, I entreat you." His eyes were shining. I remember that clearly. I did not notice in his face anything like simple pity, anything like tears. The others, mother, Liza, and Luceria, were crying. I was struck, on the contrary, and I remember this very well, by a look of unusual excitement, almost of elation, in his face. I ran for Tatiana Pavlovna. It was not far to go, as the reader knows already. I did not take a sledge, but ran all the way without stopping. My mind was in confusion, and yet there was something almost like elation in my heart too. I realized something momentous was happening. Every trace of drunkenness had disappeared completely, and with it every ignoble thought by the time I was ringing at Tatiana Pavlovna's door. The Finnish cook opened the door. "Not at home," she said, and would have shut it at once. "Not at home!" I cried, and rushed headlong into the passage. "Impossible! Makar Ivanovitch is dead!" What?" I heard Tatiana Pavlovna cry out in her drawing room through the closed door. "He is dead! Makar Ivanovitch is dead! Andrei Petrovitch begs you to go this minute." "What nonsense you're talking!" The bolt clicked, but the door only opened an inch. "What has happened? Tell me." "I don't know. He was dead when I arrived. Andrei Petrovitch says it's rupture of the heart." "I'll come at once, this minute. Run and tell them I'm coming. Run along, run along, run along. What are you stopping for?" But through the half-opened door I had distinctly seen someone come suddenly out from behind the curtain that screened Tatiana Pavlovna's bed, and that someone was standing at the back of the room behind Tatiana Pavlovna. Mechanically and instinctively I clutched at the lock and would not let the door be shut. Arkady Makarovitch, is it really true that he's dead?" I heard a soft, smooth, ringing voice, a well-known voice that thrilled everything in my heart at once. In the question was a note of some emotion that deeply stirred her heart. "Oh, if that's how it is!" cried Tatiana Pavlovna, abandoning the door. "If that's how it is, you may settle it to please yourself. It's your own doing." She ran full speed out of the flat, flinging on her kerchief and her fur coat as she went downstairs. We were left alone. I threw off my fur coat, took a step forward, and shut the door. She stood before me as she had done that time before, with a bright face, and just as she had done then, she held out both hands to me. As though I had been struck down, I literally fell at her feet. I was beginning to cry, I don't know why. I don't remember how she made me sit down beside her. I only remember, as one of my most precious memories, that we sat side by side, hand in hand, and talked eagerly. She was questioning me about the old man and his death, and I was telling her about him, so that it might have been supposed that I had been crying over Makar Ivanovitch, though that would have been the acme of absurdity, and I know that she could not possibly have suspected me of such childish banality. All at once I pulled myself together and felt ashamed. I imagine now that I cried simply from joy, and I believe she knew that perfectly well, so that my heart is quite at rest when I remember it. It suddenly struck me as very strange that she should go on questioning me about Makar Ivanovitch. "Why, did you know him?" I asked in surprise. "Yes. I have never seen him, but he has played a part in my life too. I was told a great deal about him at one time by that man whom I fear. You know what man I mean. All I know is that that man has been in the past much nearer to your heart than you told me before," I said. I don't know what I meant to express by this, but I spoke, as it were, reproachfully, and with a frown. "You say he was kissing your mother just now, holding her in his arms? You saw that yourself?" She did not hear what I said, but went on cross-examining me. "Yes, I saw it, and believe me," I hastened to assure her, seeing her joy, "it was with true and generous feeling." "God grant it," she said, crossing herself. "Now he is set free. That admirable old man simply held his life in bondage. His death will mean for him a renewal of duty and dignity as they were renewed once before. Oh, he is before all things generous. He will give peace of heart to your mother, whom he loves more than anything on earth, and will at last be at peace himself, and thank God it's high time." "He is dear to you?" "Yes, very dear, though not in the way he would have liked to be, and you mean by your question." "And is it for yourself or for him that you are afraid now?" I asked suddenly. "Oh, these are deep questions. Let us leave them." "Let us leave them, of course. But I knew nothing of this, nor of too much else, perhaps. But may you be right. Now everything will begin anew, and if any one is to be renewed, it's I first of all. I have been base in my thoughts in regard to you, Katerina Nikolaevna, and not more than an hour ago, perhaps, I was guilty of a low action in regard to you. But do you know, I am sitting beside you, and feel no pang of conscience. For everything now is over, and everything is beginning anew, and the man who was plotting vileness against you an hour ago I don't know, and don't want to know." "Come, calm yourself," she smiled. "One would think you were a little delirious." "And how can one condemn oneself beside you, whether one is good or vile? You are as far beyond one as the sun. Tell me, how could you come out to me after all that's happened? Oh, if only you knew what happened only an hour ago, and what a dream has come true." "I expect I know all that," she smiled softly. "You have just been wanting to punish me in some way. You swore to ruin me. and would certainly have killed, or at least have beaten anyone who had dared to say one word against me. Oh, she smiled and jested, but this was only from her excessive kindness, for her heart at that moment, as I realized later, was full of such an immense anxiety of her own, such a violent, overmastering emotion, that she can only have talked to me and have answered my foolish, irritating questions. She can only have done that as one sometimes answers the persistent prattle of a little child, simply to get rid of it. I understood that dully and felt ashamed, but I could not help persisting. "No," I cried, unable to control myself. "No, I did not kill the man who spoke ill of you. I encouraged him instead." "Oh, for goodness sake, please don't. There's no need to tell me anything," she said, suddenly putting out her hand to stop me, with a look of compassion in her face. But I leapt up from my seat and was standing before her to tell her everything, and if I had told her, nothing of what happened afterwards would have happened, for it would certainly have ended in my confessing everything and returning the document to her. But she suddenly laughed. "There is no need of anything, no facts at all. I know all your misdoings. I'm ready to bet that you meant to marry me or something of that sort, and you have only just been plotting about it with someone, with some accomplice, some old school friend. Why, I believe I've guessed right," she cried, looking gravely at my face. "What? How could you guess?" I faltered like a fool, tremendously impressed. "Well, what next? But that's enough, that's enough. I forgive you, but no more about it." She waved her hand again with unmistakable impatience. "I am given to dreaming myself, and if you only knew what shifts I have recourse to in my dreams when I let myself go. That's enough, you make me forget what I was going to say. I am very glad that Tatiana Pavlovna has gone away. I have been very anxious to see you, and we could not have talked as we are doing before her. I believe I was to blame for what happened. I was, of course I was." "You to blame? But I had betrayed you to him, and what can you have thought of me? I've been thinking of that all this time, all these days. I've been thinking and feeling about it every minute." It was not a lie. "There was no need for you to distress yourself so much. I quite understood at the time how it had all happened. You simply spoke too freely in your joy, and told him that you were in love with me, and that that I listened to you. Just what you would do at 20. You love him more than anyone in the world, don't you? And look to him to be your friend, your ideal? I quite understood that, but it was too late. Oh, yes, I was to blame. I ought to have sent for you at the time and have set your mind at rest, but I felt annoyed, and I told them not to admit you. That's what led to the scene at the entrance, and then that night. And do you know, like you, I've been dreaming all this time of meeting you secretly, only I did not know how to arrange it. And what do you suppose I dreaded more than anything? That you would believe what he said against me." "Never!" I cried. "The memory of our meetings in the past is dear to me. The boy in you is very dear to me. And perhaps, too, that very sincerity. You know I'm a very serious person. I am one of the most serious and gloomy characters among modern women, let me tell you. We'll have another talk sometime, but now I'm not quite myself. I am upset, and I believe I'm a little hysterical. But at last, he will let me, too, live in peace." This exclamation broke from her unconsciously. I understood it at once, and did not want to catch it up, but I trembled all over. "He knows I've forgiven him!" she exclaimed suddenly, again as though to herself. "Could you really forgive him that letter? And how could he tell that you forgave him?" I could not help exclaiming. "How could he tell? "Oh, he knows," she went on answering me, yet she looked as though she had forgotten my existence and were talking to herself. "He has come to his senses now. And how could he not know that I forgave him when he knows every secret of my soul by heart? Why, he knows that I am a little after his kind myself." "You?" "Why, yes, he knows that. Oh, I'm not passionate, I'm calm, but like him, I should like all men to be fine. Of course there was something made him love me." "How could he say that you had all the vices?" "He only said that. He has another secret in his heart. And didn't he write an awfully funny letter?" Funny? I was listening to her with strained attention. I imagined that she really was hysterical, and it was speaking, perhaps, not for my benefit. But I could not resist the question. "Oh, yes, funny, and how I should have laughed if I hadn't been frightened. Though I'm not such a coward, don't think it. But I didn't sleep all night after that letter. It seemed written in blood and frenzy. And after such a letter, what was left to come? I love life. I'm horribly afraid for my life. I'm horribly cowardly in that. Ah, listen," she cried, suddenly darting at me. "Go to him. He's alone now. He can't be there still. Most likely he's gone off somewhere alone. Make haste and find him. You must make haste. Run to him. Show him that you are his son and love him. Prove that you are the dear, kind boy, my student whom Oh, God give you happiness. I love nobody, and it is better so. But I want everyone to be happy. Everyone, and him above all. And let him know that. At once. I should be very glad." She got up and suddenly disappeared behind the curtain. At that instant tears were shining on her face, hysterical after her laughter. I remained alone, agitated and confused. I was completely at a loss to what to ascribe such emotion in her, an emotion which I never should have suspected. Something seemed to be clutching at my heart. I waited 5 minutes, 10. The profound silence suddenly struck me, and I ventured to peep out of the door and to call. In answer to my call, Maria appeared and informed me in the most stolid tone that the lady had put on her things long, long ago, and gone out by the back way. End of Part 3, Chapter 6. Recording by Linda Johnson.